Hi everyone, this is Diogo from Arista Tech, and in this video I'm going to be covering how you can deploy a virtual environment with Containerlab and cEOS-lab directly from GitHub Codespaces. I'll start by talking about the different challenges we can face while running local virtual labs. I'll provide a brief introduction about GitHub and GitHub Codespaces, focusing especially on the benefits that they can bring while deploying this type of labs. And by the end, of course, I'll be demonstrating how to set this up and run your own labs directly from the cloud. So what are the problems that you might face while trying to set up this type of environment locally? So first of all, you require to have a Linux machine. That means that either you have to have a dedicated computer for it, or you need to run Linux on your own computer, or another alternative is to have a virtual machine, but then the virtual machine will also consume resources from your desktop, laptop, whatever computer you have. The other issue is that you need to configure a series of things. You need to install packages, you need to maintain them, you need to take care of the operating system, etc., which might not be as straightforward and introduces some overhead in terms of administration. And last but not least, having the virtual environment locally means that if you want to replicate that in some other place, you need to set up everything else from scratch. You need to share files, you need to download files, transfer files around, install different applications packages in different environments. There might be differences in terms of dependencies or things that are missing in a particular computer. So all of these introduce some delays, chances of things being broken or being not consistent. So if you can have this running directly in a virtual environment in the cloud, that can be extremely useful. So I would assume that most people are already very familiar with what GitHub is. Obviously, it is something that is more well known among developers, but anyone in working IT will probably have an idea about Git and GitHub. So GitHub is essentially a cloud-based solution where you can store, share, and work together, collaborate with other people writing code. Git is the base of it, right? So you have Git locally that you can use just locally, and it's gonna help you keep tracking of your changes, your code, and manage all the progress you have in terms of development of software. And then GitHub goes beyond by extending this to shared resource that is in the cloud, and it can facilitate the sharing of resources, code, contributions from different people, etc. And within GitHub, we have GitHub Codespaces. So it's essentially a cloud-based development environment that can be accessible directly from GitHub repositories. So you can just go to GitHub and you can start a new environment. So instead of having to clone this repository locally, you can just spin up your own environment on the cloud, and everything from the repository will be there for you to use. So it basically eliminates the need to have a local setup, and everything will tend to be very consistent because whatever you have in the repository is going to be added to this code space. So it will ensure that everyone that is using it is able to replicate the environment very consistently. It has an integration with VS Code. By default, it opens a web browser version of VS Code, but you can even use your local application if you want to, and it's going to connect to the code space you created, and they're going to be able to manipulate all the files and run everything from the VS Code locally installed in your machine. You just need to have a web browser. You can have also VS Code, as I mentioned. You can run it locally as an application connecting to your code space, but if you don't have that installed, you can just use the web browser. It will open essentially the same interface via web. You will need to have a GitHub account. Again, it can be a free account to start with. Obviously, there will be limitations in terms of what you can do, performance, etc. But overall, you can do a lot of stuff with the free account version. And of course, if you're talking about using cEOS-lab, we do need to have Arista free accounts in order to download the software from our website. So in order to deploy such environment, the overall steps are, first of all, start a Codespace environment. Then you can install Containerlab, transfer the cEOS-lab image or any other image you wanted to use. Some images can actually be downloaded automatically by Containerlab, but that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more later on. Then after transferring the cEOS image to your container, we now need to import that into Docker. And finally, we'll be able to create, edit our lab topologies and also start our lab environments using Containerlab. So let's start with the demonstration. First of all, there are multiple ways you can do it. So for example, you can go first to the repository that you are interested in, and you can start a Codespace via this repository. Or you can go directly to the main page of Codespace, search for whatever repository you are interested in, or even start a completely new session with nothing and create everything from scratch. In your case, I will show you the workflow that I usually follow most of the time, which is also quite simple. So I will first of all find the repository I'm interested in. As usual, I'm gonna use this very simple topology here that I have as part of my repository with simple labs for Containerlab and cEOS. I'll click on code. Then you can see we have the option Codespace. I'll click on the three dots, and the three dots will give me a few options here. I'll click on new with options. This is gonna bring us to this page where you can choose the branch. In this case, is the main branch. We can choose Devcontainer configurations. This is something that I didn't mention before, but essentially is a way you can pre-configure your environment with certain characteristics, a specific image. In this case, this repository has 3 different Devcontainer configurations. I'll start demonstrating the first one here, which have been built using Linux with a bunch of useful packages already installed, which also includes everything that is needed for Containerlab to run properly. So in this case, we won't even need to install Containerlab manually. So you can choose the region according to your location, and then you have the machine type. This Devcontainer configuration is already set to use this particular spec, 4 cores, 16 gigs of RAM with 32 gigs of storage. At the moment, the free tier for GitLab Codespaces allow you to choose only between those two choices. So I pre-configured this Devcontainer in order to use the best option we have available, which is 4 cores. Review all my configuration. I can just click on Create Codespace. And as you can see, it starts setting up everything, opening a VS Code interface in my browser. So if I click here in building Codespace, we can see a series of things are done in the background. You have the container specification being downloaded, the image, container being built based on the Devcontainer JSON file that I have as part of my repository. After a few seconds, you can see that everything has been properly downloaded and installed. You can also see that now we have access to all files that are part of my repository. The README file opens already by default, and you can just click on plus here and will open a new terminal so we can work on our CLI. An interesting fact is that, as you can see also, we have here this tab for the Containerlab extension for VS Code, and this has been automatically installed as well as part of my Devcontainer configuration. So before we do anything else, let's first of all confirm if Containerlab is installed, and it is. This is not the latest release because this particular image comes with this particular cEOS-lab release, but you can just update that very easily by using cEOS-lab version upgrade. And you see that cEOS-lab is now successfully updated to the latest version. So if you look at the files we have available, we have our topology YAML. We can open this in your VS Code here. It suggests a few things like extensions that might be useful. You can accept that if you want to. And you see that now we have this image 434.1f as part of my topology configuration. At the moment, if I do Docker images, I don't have any image available, right? So I previously downloaded the cEOS version to my laptop, and the process of transferring it to the virtual space is extremely easy. You can just drag and drop, and the image will be transferred to your Codespace environment in a few minutes, depending on how fast your internet connection is. Okay, now our file is already transferred successfully. We can check here for our file. And the next step will be just to make sure that we are importing this to Docker. So as usual, Docker import. To paste some content, copy and paste, you need to allow here your browser, probably Chrome and others will have similar stuff. So you just need to allow for this to work. And then you can import with the names that you have depending on your version and your name scheme. So it takes a few seconds or a minute. After some time, the import process is now done. So now if you do Docker images, you see your image there. This matches the definition I have here in my topology YAML file. So I should be able to now just deploy your topology using cEOS-lab CLI. And as expected, things look just fine. So now the deployment is done. We have here our 2 hosts. And you can also monitor here if you want. You can, for example, use htop to see how CPU and memory utilization are at the moment. You can check, free memory. And you see that we still have plenty of memory available, so we could deploy even bigger labs here. So it all depends on the resources you have and also what size or how many instances, how much memory each instance is taking. So based on all those aspects, you're gonna be able to run larger or smaller labs. So just for completeness, this is the same for any deployments. You can just SSH and you see that now you are in your cEOS-1 instance. Show version, show LDP neighbors as usual. You see we have our other hosts. I can again split and open the other one. And we see we do have both running, no problem at all. Everything else will be the same. So I already have a video showing a little bit more on how you can configure things very quickly and do some basic testing. I'll have the link available for you guys to have a look. But yeah, everything is completely the same as having this in your own machine, but with the advantage of not having to install anything. You don't need to worry about anything at all. You don't even need to have a Linux virtual machine or a Linux server, whatever. You can just run this automatically from this virtual cloud environment, and having all your lab files or lab configurations already stored here. And one thing that's worth mentioning is a little bit more about Devcontainer. This can be a bit of an extensive subject, so I'm not gonna go into details right now, but I just want to show you some basic configuration here so you have an idea about how powerful this is, because as you can see here, we had even a easier experience, a more straightforward experience, because we didn't even need to install Containerlab itself. And this is because if you look at the Devcontainer JSON file, we have a few things here. First of all, this is the actual image that is being used to create this container. There are some features that need to be enabled. So for example, we are actually doing Docker in Docker. So we have to have this feature properly enabled. A series of things here that for simplicity, I won't really touch on right now, but here is also where you can set the extension to be automatically installed. So this saves you a lot of time, and you don't need to explain a step-by-step to everyone that is going to run these labs. You can just customize the Devcontainer in a way that you're going to be able to spin up instance very quickly. Anybody, even with not a lot of knowledge about all of those things, will be able to just spin up lab and do the testing that they want to. And this last part, by the way, is how we can specify what the host requirements are, right? So we saw before I start the creation of the machine, we had already this set of specs here selected. So this is because I included this information here as part of the Devcontainer configuration. There are other ways of deploying this, and by the way, this doesn't need to be only for GitHub Codespaces, and this is actually something that can help you when creating these environments in your own local machine. You can create a container, and I'll probably cover that in the next upcoming videos, how you can actually also deploy like a container within your local machine, so you don't need to install everything in your local machine every time. Before wrapping it up, I just want to leave here some useful references about GitHub, Codespaces, how to deploy Containerlab on those, and also two of the more relevant Arista Community Central articles that I published recently. The first one is pretty much what we covered in this video, and the second one is an overview about Containerlab and cEOS-lab in general. So this is gonna be useful for any type of deployment, no matter if it's local, if it's on a server, if it's in a cloud environment. It provides some context, background information, and some examples. I'm planning to cover more specific and complex things that you can do with this combination. Again, it's a very powerful way of virtualizing networking labs. So I'll be producing more articles and more videos demonstrating some of these cool things that you can do. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was helpful, and stay tuned for next videos. Cheers.